So good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad you're here for a director's meeting today. It is Monday, February 14th. Hopefully your team won or at least had fun at the Super Bowl last night, and that you're having a good Valentine's Day and feeling loved and supported all around. We will go ahead and open with our director, Jennifer Lambert, who has some opening business to share with you this afternoon. I almost said this morning. What time is it? This afternoon. Jennifer, please take it away.
Thank you, Marie, and welcome everyone. Welcome to this beautiful February morning, or I think it's morning too, afternoon. I just wanted to go over a few legislative stuff, and I actually have Chair Tonks here to talk to you as well and to answer questions. There's a number of bills that you may be interested in and looking at. There's everything from the Hope Scholarship, which some may term as a voucher bill, to transparency and education and curriculum, and all sorts of things. Just a couple of bills that are very charter specific that I just kind of wanted to go over very briefly with you. One is about charter school special education directors, and it is a bill. It looks like it's going through pretty well. It looks like it's probably going to pass. What it does is it would require that if you have a special education director, that director would have to be appropriately licensed. This apparently is being driven by what the feds told USBE in preparation for an audit. However, it does not change the requirement of whether or not you have to have a special education director. It's just if you do have such a position, that position must be appropriately licensed. Another one, it deals with charter school admission preferences. And it largely has to do with if you have an articulation agreement with another school. It looks like this one is going to pass as well. The State Charter School Board has not taken a position on it, but generally speaking, we are in favor of having good preferences. And just so that you are aware, these are not preferences that you have to allow for. If you want to allow for these preferences, you can get them added to your charter agreement, and then you can use these preferences when you are enrolling students. So those are two very specific charter school bills that it looks like they probably will pass. There's another one that deals with charter school authorizing that I know got the associations quite excited in a negative way, and that they did not like. And this one, we don't expect that it will pass, but it was really a great opportunity to open up dialogue. And what this does, or would have done, is it would have created a renewal process within Utah. Utah is the only state that has charter schools that does not have charter renewals. And I don't know, Chair Tonks, is there anything you wanted to share about this?
Yeah, I thank you so much. It's nice to be here with everybody. I just wanted to share some of maybe the historical context for it, that the legislature asked their legislative auditors to do an audit on the relationship between the State Board of Education and the State Charter School Board, mainly in response to AISU closing, which, if you paid attention at all to any news media at that point in time, it dominated the news cycles for quite a lengthy time. And in my experience, and perhaps you've seen the same thing, a lot of people think that there are like 5 charter schools in Utah. So this was a big, huge story. And now, oh no, the other 4 charter schools in Utah are going to close and it's going to be terrible. And people don't realize that there are 135-ish charter schools, and that the number of schools that have actually closed is really small. And so this was the impetus for the legislative audit. When those audits come out after a year and a half, 2 years of research by the legislative auditors, sometimes they include recommendations, and this one did. And one of the recommendations was for a charter renewals, so that every 5 years or whatever length of time, charter schools would have the opportunity to come in and show what they had accomplished over the next 5 years, and would give the authorizers the ability to differentiate between our schools in our portfolios, and just like we do students in our classrooms. And as you all know, some students need a little bit more intervention, some students need less intervention, but having a typical time to come and check in and let us know how things are going. The way that it was received was not good. And what we recognized was that the voices of the school were missing, and we apologize for not asking. I personally, I won't speak for Jennifer, but I personally didn't think this bill would go anywhere, and was caught a little off guard that it moved along the way it did. Nevertheless, we value input from the schools that we authorize. That was a step that was missed in this process, and I wanted a chance to come and apologize and make sure that you, as charter schools across the state, knew that that was not intentional, that we really value your input. We know that this bill is not going to pass this session, and if it comes up in the future, we have some ideas on how to go about doing things differently. So that's what I wanted to contribute. Back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. I actually didn't turn off my mic, so I didn't have to turn it on. So that is just basically, I just echo what Delana Tonks said, that we didn't anticipate it going as far as it did, and so we didn't see a need to contact you guys and get your thoughts. We were just going along with what the audit had come out, and so we very much appreciate the feedback that we have received, and we very much want to open this dialogue, and we want to hear from you. And that's it. I just want to open it up. Are there any specific bills that you have questions about that I can try to answer? I don't want to go through all of them. It's still very much in flux. We've got about 3 more weeks, and a lot of the major bills have still yet to be kind of decided on and looked at. Just in terms of funding, the base budget does have a 2.5 or 2.6, 2.4, somewhere around there, percent increase in the WPU. The House Public Education Committee did recommend to add that to so that it would come up to be a 5% increase. So that is really great news that the legislature is prioritizing putting money to education, and specifically the WPU. Any questions on legislation? All right, well, thank you. I know that Marie has some housekeeping items as well, but I think you share those at the end, correct? So that everyone's
We're
here.
actually going to do them right now. So we will hop into those housekeeping items real quick.
I will turn it over to you then.
Thank you so much. Sometimes we do it at the end when we run out of time. So, but right now we are right on schedule and things are moving along great. So we have our In Case You Missed It for the month of February. So here we go. Our February newsletter came out. So if you haven't seen that yet, or you need another copy, let us know and we will send you that link. The Morelli Scholarship is also currently available. The deadline is coming up 14 days from now, Monday, February 28th. And so this is a scholarship that we want to make sure that you are aware of if you are serving high school students that could benefit from this scholarship. Also, Director Lambert forwarded today a flyer about an education forum that's coming up. That is actually on Thursday this week, and the RSVP date is tomorrow. So if you'd like to join in that education forum, please make sure that that is on your radar for this week. Similarly, a reading seminar had some information sent to you by Sarah Whipke. It was about decoding dyslexia, and they're doing a spring seminar that's going to be virtual in April. Looks like the cost is only $25. So that might be a good one to send some teachers to, as it is quite affordably priced. Also, the school fees newsletter came out. Some of the big items to make sure you're aware of are that your fee schedules are due April 1st. They have a spring training coming up in March. They also talked about monitoring visits and some website updates. So again, if you need a copy of that or just the link resent, let us know and we can get that for you. Also, the State Board of Education is seeking feedback on their gender identity guidance for Utah schools. If that is something that you would like to share, it is the open and I think it opened last week, and then the committee will be meeting on February 23rd if you'd like to participate in that. Our upcoming training and support from the State Charter School Board. You'll notice that today we have a different topic. We were going to be doing cultivating educator efficacy this afternoon. That has been postponed until April. So today we will be doing compassionate school discipline. Our board training this month is about oversight and accountability. Our teacher training is engagement strategies that they can use today. And then our business and finance training has also been postponed. That one is postponed due to some timeline changes, and Smriti will be on with us a little later to talk about that and what to expect. Then you've got the March trainings coming up as well, so we hope that you are able to join us for some of those. As far as other trainings, it's kind of quiet right now. I know UAPCS is doing a few, so watch for an updated flyer from them. And they do have their policy training series that is currently running. That is once a week on Wednesdays at lunchtime. It gives you some great information about policies. Our next meeting is March 14th. It'll still be over Zoom, 12:30 to 3. And so we'll be happy to see you then as well. And so without further ado, that takes us through all of our business. We will turn the time over to Ben Rasmussen, who is here to give us a Purple Star Schools update.
Thank you, Marie. I appreciate being with you today. Happy Valentine's Day, or if you're like me, happy Single Awareness Day. And I appreciate being able to chat with you just a couple minutes about our state's Purple Star Schools program. You may remember, I think I've talked to you about this last year just before, and I've talked to you before about the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children, which this program supports. So that is what I just wanted to kind of highlight for you today. We can go to the next slide. Last year was our first year doing Purple Star Schools, and we had 4 charter schools that we gave this distinction to last year that applied and received the distinction. So I want to give a shout out to those schools first of all. American Preparatory Academy, Monticello Academy, Ogden Preparatory Academy, and Syracuse Arts Academy. These are all schools that are doing great things for our military students, for military families that come into the state, and we were very impressed by their applications. We hope that we'll get some more this year. Next slide. So just so you can remember what's involved here, in order to be a Purple Star school, there's about 5 components that you're required to do. It's all set up in board rule. So first thing you have to do is you have to have somebody on staff that's a dedicated point of contact for your military families. This can be one of your administrators, this can be a counselor, a teacher that's the point person for that. But you have to have a dedicated point of contact. You have to have a web page that kind of has a few specific resources for military families and helps them to get oriented to what your school offers and other resources. We require a student-led transition program so that students can help the new kids that come in so that they can get oriented with your school and get familiar with how things work at your school. Many of you, I think, already have kind of transition programs for just about any student that comes in to your schools that I think can be easily adapted for this type of thing. And so I think that's a good thing, not only for military students, but for any students really that come into the school. We require professional development for your staff on what's anticipated for military students. And then we have a pick one kind of situation where I think a lot of schools have a military recognition event during the school year. So that can be one thing. Governing board resolution to support military families can be one thing. Or you can partner to provide service opportunities to keep the military families involved in volunteering at your school. So that's what's required. Next slide. We have applications open now. I believe I sent you all an email a week or two ago that had this information, but I just kind of wanted to come in and emphasize it and give a pitch for you to really think about whether this can be of benefit to your school. I know that so many military families are coming into our state now, and this is a program that's really is blossoming across the nation. And so more and more families are looking for Purple Star schools when they come into the state on military assignments. And so we hope that you'll look into whether this might be something good for you to apply for. I've given you a couple names there on the slide. You've got my contact information. I've also put the contact information for Leslie Flynn. She's the school liaison officer at Hill Air Force Base. Either one of us can help you talk through what you're working to put together if you're interested in pursuing this designation. The application isn't too complicated. You just have to get your program together, and we're happy to help you in that regard. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but other than that, that's all I have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben. I don't see any questions coming into chat. We'll go ahead and give just a few more seconds of wait time on that. So if
I
there are
actually have a question.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
So I'm not as familiar with this. Is this for military families who move to the state of Utah, or for an online school, would it be any family anywhere in the United States that could access the online school?
Well, that's a good question. We haven't designated any online schools as Purple Star schools here yet, but I would guess in some of the other states they've had that, they've confronted that. So we'd certainly be willing to talk to you about what that could look like in your particular situation if you're an online school and interested in pursuing that.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
All right. Well, if there are any other questions, you think of it later, let us know, and we're happy to get you in touch with Ben. And thank you, Ben, for being here today.
Thanks, Marie. Have a good day.
You too. All right, next we have Leslie Evans here, and she is a school improvement education specialist with USBE, and she's going to be talking about the TSI timeline and the impact of the pandemic. So Leslie, we will turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Marie. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. I'll share my screen here.
I'm wondering if Leslie is frozen.
I think you're right, Marie.
Okay, I was like, oh, maybe it's me. We will give her just a minute with her technical difficulty there, and hopefully we will get moving forward in just a minute. And it looks like we've lost her. This is where we need our technical hold music while we
So,
get
Marie?
Yes.
I was just looking at the agenda and I thought we were going to cover campaigns, and I see that's not on the agenda. Could I just maybe take a couple minutes to do that while we get Leslie back on?
Yes, it is a little bit later on the agenda.
It is. Okay. I just don't see it right there, but if you want, I can do that and we can flip, or we can just wait for her.
Either way is just fine. So if you don't want to talk about campaigns, that would be great.
Okay. So I do want to talk about the campaign that was just finished and what our intent was and where it's going to be different in the future. So the whole point behind what we're calling campaigns, and we don't have a better term for it. Some people think that's marketing. It's not marketing. What it is we identify something that is maybe a common problem throughout charter schools and maybe all of public schools, all LEAs. And it's kind of like in a classroom. If you find that a lot of your students are maybe not getting a concept, you don't just blame the students. You think, well, maybe there was something that I could have done better. Or maybe there is something that a concept that they maybe didn't get before. So you think about different ways to teach that, or you just address it differently. That's what we're thinking here. So if we receive information such as, like with open and public meetings, we know that there's individuals in the community who will make a lot of complaints to us about individual schools, maybe certain individuals that this is just their interest. And so what we wanted to do is provide opportunity for schools to be able to come into compliance. What happened is that we did a couple of where we did reviews where we were looking and we got the information. What I now realize is that you guys did not get that information and until we sent out notices of concern. And that's just not what we intended, nor is it what we want to do in the future. So Marie will, along with a number of the other documents for this meeting, she will send out something that is an internal staff procedure. I mean, any of our procedures are open to anyone who wants to look at them, but they are staff procedures, and so kind of written with pencil that, you know, as needed, we may go back and change some of the procedures. But I do want to, can I just quickly share that?
Yeah, that will be just fine. And it looks like Leslie's here, so I'll just let her know real quick that we're moving forward with campaigns, and then we will get right back to her.
Okay. So if you look, this is just, she'll post this, you can read it. It's 4 pages long, but the philosophy is that it's done as part of a comprehensive approach to be able to improve something. And so what we do is that we will, if there's something that's identified that could be potentially an issue, then we would create a rubric to kind of assess that. We'll create trainings. We'll do a first pass to see who, like, for example, in open and public meetings, who's posting their agendas, their meeting minutes, etc. Then what we will do is we will notify anyone that we find that isn't. We'll say that, hey, we weren't able to find this. This is the rubric we used. If in the case, and this is what we're finding is some of the cases, is that we just weren't able to find it. You guys were posting the meeting minutes or agendas, but we were not able to find it. And so we would then, during what we would call the campaign phase, we would be able to work that out. We would be able to find it. So by the end of the campaign, we would do kind of the final pass of looking through everyone. Our hope, our plan is that we would have 100% compliance because we've worked with you. You now better understand what's expected of you. We're better understanding what you guys are doing and the circumstances that you are facing. We also will make sure that we are in good understanding with our with different attorneys of what it is that you're going to be held to. So let me give you an example of this. So what was going to be discussed today, Greg was going to come and discuss about the volunteer policies that many of you have. We want volunteers. We welcome volunteers in charter schools. That's one of the purposes for charter schools. But you need to make sure that in how you're asking for volunteers, that it is very clear to the parents that they're not having to volunteer, but that it is actually volunteer, that it is not a requirement for enrollment. The school fees team, a few director meetings ago, they stated that if you put a number of hours on your request for volunteer people that would in effect not make it a volunteer, but it would make it as part of a school fee. We've gone back and forth with our attorneys, their attorneys, and we have gotten clarification that that is not the case, that putting an hour on it doesn't make it not being a volunteer type of a request. So we will make sure that we are very clear on what is required and what isn't required. And that is kind of just in a nutshell. Our plan is to never again do like what we did and send out so many notices of concern. I think that we did not see sending notice of concern as a big deal because we no longer see those as being a big deal. Those no longer, they don't change your status. They don't change that we still see you as a good school. It's just letting you know that this is something that we see as needing to be fixed. But we also recognize that's not how you all view those. And so there was a lot of angst. Just want to say that we're going to do these in the future, these campaigns, but they are going to run differently. They're going to feel more supportive. They're going to be something where we're trying to help you get into compliance rather than just identify this is something that we want you to comply with and then just send out a bunch of letters saying that you're not in compliance. So we really are going to change this up so that in the future, we really are being proactive and we're heading off opportunities for others to find problems with charter schools, because charter schools are such amazing options. And right now there's a lot of discussion about choice and what about, you know, are charter schools really good options of choice because they're still public school. There's just so much talk out there right now about charter schools. The fact is charter schools are great options and they do so much. We just want to help promote that. And that's all I have to say. Are there any questions on this?
Yeah, Jennifer, I have a quick question. I just wanted to clarify when you talked about the hours piece, because our parent volunteer piece does ask our parents to come in and volunteer 20 hours. And we removed it last year because of that concern of it being considered a fee, you know, just like you mentioned that back and forth. So I don't have it on there now. But many of our parents are asking because in the past, historically, we have an event at the end of the year where we congratulate parents based on the hours they provided, and we give them a cute little certificate and a little chocolate, something silly, but something that parents apparently miss because now they're asking for it. So if I were to go back and add a number, 20 hours, whatever, we're fine to do that, is what you're saying.
So what we got is very specific. What the answer that we went the rounds on, because when we heard that, oh, well, hours is going to make it not be a volunteer, it's going to make it a school fee, we're like, wait a minute, that just doesn't sound right. It makes it very easy for someone auditing going, oh, there's a number there, because we're running into that problem as we're trying to create a rubric for this to go through, because there are a number of ways that volunteer hours are being requested that makes it appear to us, and I'm sure to parents, that it is something that it is required for enrollment, that it is a fee. A number of private schools do that in, you know, in order to enroll their student, the parents have to agree to X number of hours. So I would suggest contacting your portfolio manager, and if you don't know who they are, you're welcome to contact me. I'll get you in touch. But we can help work with you because there isn't a clear formula. There are ways that you can put in the hour that is just fine, but there's also ways that you can put in the number of hours that would make it appear to a parent that they have to give at least that number of hours or else their student can't enroll. So it really depends upon how you phrase it. Does that make sense? Okay. I just want to thank Renee. Those of you who have opened the chat, what she said is really what we want to do in the future. She is correct that, well, one of the issues was that the information that we were looking at different schools' websites, and some websites, we did a really good job and we were able to find where this information was kept. There were some websites that, to be very honest, were hard for us to find where that information was kept. I would suggest that you may want to make sure and have maybe a parent look at your website and say, does it make sense? Can they find these things? But whether or not they can find it or whether or not we could find it, if it was there, you're meeting what is required. And so just because if you found that you were sent the letter and you think that it was in error, that the information was up there, but we weren't just finding it, let us know that and we will resolve it. We'll say that this is done. And there wasn't, I agree, there wasn't the correspondence before the letter. And that again is what we are planning to change. And so I am sorry that it did not go how we intended, how it was in our plans and our minds. Please forgive us. But we're really hopeful and we are very optimistic that moving forward, this is going to work and it's going to be a positive thing. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was great to go over that. We will now try Leslie again. Fingers crossed that this will be a successful screen transfer here. So Leslie, your turn.
Cross my fingers. That was like a complete system shutdown. So let's see how it looks. I'm still here, looks like. Okay.
We are too. Great job.
Fantastic. It's nice to be here. I was invited and also brought up that a lot of schools out in Utah, all schools, charter and district, have had very little information about targeted support and improvement status, and we have many schools identified for that status. So I wanted to give an overview, answer any questions, talk about timelines and the impact of COVID, and I'll go over that here in a second. I think I just stated my objectives. I hope I achieve them. So to give an overview, this picture should help you to clarify where TSI sits in the number of school improvement programs that we house here in Utah. By the way, I'm an education specialist and I work for the Continuous Improvement Center at USBE for school improvement. So ESSA is a federal piece of legislation that went into act in 2015, but Utah started identifying schools in 2018, 2019. And under this act, each state wrote a state plan that outlined how they will achieve the requirements of ESSA. So when I mention ESSA, I'm talking about a federal school improvement program that is guided by federal requirements, but there is flexibility at the state level. And so under federal school improvement, you have comprehensive support and improvement, and there are two categories there that I can answer questions about today, but it's not the focus. And the focus today will be targeted support and improvement, and we often call it TSI. We'll talk about identification and all that, but off to the side, you see we have a Utah State School Turnaround Program, which is totally different than the federal requirements. A lot of words here, but this is the identification as noted in our ESSA state plan for Utah, that the intent of targeted support and improvement is to identify schools that have a consistently underperforming student group and to then provide supports for those schools. So 2 consecutive years were counted pre-pandemic to identify schools, and schools were identified if those student groups fell below the points associated with the lowest 5% of all schools in Utah. I will go into detail more, but if there are questions, Marie, if you'll alert me to chat, and I can pause at any time. The student groups include students who are identified as economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, English learners, and then all the major racial and ethnic groups that we disaggregate data by. A few caveats since we're in the era of exceptions and irregularities. So TSI schools are generally identified every year. However, for obvious reasons, in 2019-20 and in 2020-21, we did not identify new TSI schools. The US Department of Ed, despite states asking many questions and essentially protesting, is requiring all states to continue the accountability system and to identify TSI as well as CSI schools in 2022. Under TSI, unlike CSI or turnaround, each LEA is responsible to create and implement a school improvement plan for those student groups. The LEA does not need to turn that plan into the state, but should have a plan to help alleviate that gap between the student group and the school's overall performance. Again, if you want to read Utah's ESSA state plan, there's a link here, and I will share these slides with Marie. This slide is to remind folks or introduce folks to the accountability system and the indicators by which schools are differentiated for these different designations. These are the indicator percentages and points associated with elementary schools and middle schools. As you'll see, there's achievement indicator, growth, English learner progress, growth of the lowest performing 25%, and then there's a total of 150 points possible. Similarly, for high schools, we have those one additional category that counts for 75 points, and those include high school graduation, ACT, and advanced coursework. There are many, many details to how these indicators are calculated in the accountability system, so I encourage you to check out the accountability technical manual at your convenience. Here are those student groups. So for TSI, once again, targeted support and improvement, the accountability system will take each of these student groups and essentially, if the student group is larger than 10, so the N size is greater than 10 for that school, each of these student groups is run through that accountability system like a tiny school. So if the student group's in a high school, they'll be run through all those indicators. And if they're in elementary, same thing, but for the elementary points. I think it might be good to pause right here, just in case I have any questions.
There aren't any in the chat right now, Leslie.
Okay, I'll just keep rolling along, but don't let me keep going if you're confused. So the way I just talked a little bit about how targeted support and improvement student groups are identified. Essentially, the accountability system is run for all schools for those indicators that I showed. Those schools are ranked and a cut score is set. So in other words, when all the schools are put in a ranked list by points earned out of points possible, we make a cut at the 5%. So lowest 5% of schools, and they make a cut. So then those student groups that have an N size greater than 10 are entered into the accountability system, again, kind of like a small school within a school. And then the question is, does the school have any student groups performing at or below that 5% for all schools? And if they do, then that student group is designated as a TSI school, which means the LEA needs to write and implement a plan to help to increase that student's outcomes in the accountability system. So pre-pandemic, there are two cohorts that we're calling the 17-18 cohort and the 18-19 cohort. And I'll go into timelines for both of those. No new schools were identified in 20 or 21. And like I said, the next identification will be fall 22. We have a process that's being proposed right now and that's out for public comment. I'll also give you the link to that information. The one exception is that we don't double identify schools. So if your school was in CSI or turnaround, those years in that program do not count toward TSI. And I can have individual conversations with anyone that might apply to. So in order to exit, you must have 2 consecutive years of that TSI student group performing above that lowest 5% cut. Each student group is identified for TSI, and you have 4 years to exit, but we'll talk about the exception there as well due to the pandemic. And you'll also, I'll get into that detail later. Here are the links for the rank list for 17-18, the rank list for 18-19, so that you can see the data that did identify or didn't identify your school. It's important to know that a school could have multiple student groups for which it's identified, and each student group has its own exit timeline and its own has to meet that criteria 2 years in a row above 5%, excuse me, to exit. I have a few case examples that I can show you as well. So that first cohort that we're calling the 17-18 cohort, because 16-17 and 17-18 data identified that cohort, here's what your timeline looks like. You had 1 year in 2018, 2019, and then in 1920 and in 2021, we did not use results for accountability, and in 20 we had no results. So those years are essentially skipped. 21-22, some schools may have 2 years in a row above 5%. So that's considered year 2. This current school year is year 2. Next year will be year 3. And by year 4, 23-24, at the end of the year, those schools will have to have been above the 5% cut. The consequences, if the schools are not above the 5% cut, is that school is then identified for comprehensive support and improvement if it's a Title I school. And if it is not, we have a category called ATSI that's still being vetted by the Department of Education. Okay, the next cohort. So, sorry, here are the examples. So if my school entered for students with disabilities and English language learners in that first cohort, 17-18, and my students with disabilities were not above 5% the first year, they're not above 5% this year, but they are above 5% in the third and fourth year, excuse me, that student group exits. But my English learners are still identified as well. So in year 1, they were above 5%. This school year, they dipped down below 5%. Year 3, they're above. Year 4, they're not. And if they do not, so then if the school is a Title I school, they are identified for comprehensive support and improvement. So I'll move on to the examples for the next cohort and the timeline, unless there are some questions.
I have a question, Leslie, with the new amendment going forward to the federal government that's out for comment, how would that impact TSI and this identification timeline that you've indicated?
So included in that addendum for current schools, we're essentially just saying we're going to skip 19 and 20, like this picture shows right here. Going forward, if you don't mind, I have a slide at the end that will talk a little bit about what's involved with that addendum.
Okay, that's fine, because I had thought it also included 2021 in it, but maybe I did not read it accurately.
Well,
So, until you're on the slide.
This is what I focus on every day, and it still can be confusing, so don't worry. It does include 2021 as far as the use of data to identify new schools. So,
To just identify new. Okay.
yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that. And it also acknowledges in the addendum that we are not going to count 19, 20, and 21 for TSI, targeted support and improvement. So hold your question. If I don't answer it by the end, I'm happy to circle back. So for the second cohort of targeted support and improvement, we're calling the 18-19 cohort because the data for 17-18 and 18-19 identified those schools or student groups. 19-20, 20-21 are obviously didn't count because there are accountability irregularities. So year one of that cohort student group timeline of 4 years started this school year. And so it's a little bit clearer here without the gap that they need to, those student groups need to have 2 years above the 5% cut to exit in 24-25. I will say in the addendum that Deborah just brought up, we are acknowledging that we cannot predict what's going to happen to the cut score between 2018-19 and today. So we have advocated in our addendum to the Department of Ed that we will hold that cut score, the 5% from the 18-19 school year. And that's a change because usually it fluctuates and changes. And honestly, it fluctuates and changes for instances like the pandemic. So for this cohort, same kinds of examples, exactly the same, but they have to be 2 years in a row, starting with, this is not the right slide. It would be 21-22. I'll change this before I send it out. I apologize. 21-22, 22-23, 23-24. Okay. Oh, sorry, this is the first year. I'll make sure it's correct before I send out the slides. But essentially, within that 4 years, you have to have 2 consecutive years in a row above 5%. Okay, so now that I just flubbed that last slide, perhaps, any questions about the second cohort? It all depends on what year your school and student groups were identified. So it is possible that my school could have students with disabilities identified the first year, and that's tracking along its 4-year timeline. And then the next year I had students, EL students identified, and that starts on the next cohort timeline. I promise we understand that this could be confusing and hard to track, and are working closely with data and statistics to create dashboards in a more visual way, an understandable way to track. So really quick, if you're not sure where and don't look for a minute if it's going to make you dizzy. If you're not sure where to find your data, I will add that slide as well. I've been doing this presentation too much. I'm sorry. This is, oh, here it is. On this slide, there's a list or a link to the resources page of the assessment website, and then the rank list to show you in which year your school may have been identified for a student group. So before I move on to what's going to happen fall 22, any questions? Or what are your questions? I'm sure there are questions. Just might not be ready to pose them now. Okay. So
Leslie, one question just came in. They're wondering, excuse me, can they see the rank list from 2021? And they said, recognizing that there were irregularities and that it will not apply to exit years.
yeah, thanks for requesting that. That's one of the biggest issues right now is that 2021 RISE, ACT, all the things were given with the expectation that those data would not be used for accountability. So we did not make a rank list. We did not publish anything like that. However, We understand that it would be advantageous to understand where your student groups fall in the rank list. So just this morning, I met with our data specialist, new data specialist in school improvement, who's going to help secure that rank list. So that leads us right into here. Oops. So the short answer is we are creating the 2021 rank list. There's a bit of a decision to make on how to share that rank list out. But we're proposing that every school with a TSI student group will get that rank list sent to them, probably through a secure portal, since we don't want it to confuse everything else. I don't know if that makes sense. Did that answer the person's question? Forthcoming 2021 rank list.
It looks like it. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, this is all somewhat breaking news, so not quite that proficient yet. So once we got word from the Department of Education that we would indeed need to identify new schools in 22, we convened the Technical Advisory Committee and the Assessment and Accountability Policy Advisory Committee, TAC and APAC respectively. And they helped to create our addendum, which is the 1-year addendum that you may have received an invitation for public comment. Though the experts, those committees are made up of LEA, charter, assessment directors, people who are very familiar with the accountability system. And they very much acknowledged that it's difficult to use 2021 data for accountability after saying we wouldn't. But after lots of discussion, I believe it was about a 4-hour meeting, those members did vote to say that that was probably the best option available. Other options were use pre-pandemic data to help find those 2 years to identify the school, etc. No one felt, the majority did not feel comfortable using pre-pandemic data. So the decision was and what we're proposing in this addendum is that we will remove student growth targets and only use student growth percentiles. And the short answer reason for removing student growth targets, if you'll remember, those are the individual student targets based on past performance. When modeled and when analyzed, the student growth targets seem to have a lot more variance due to the pandemic. Things like socioeconomic status and other factors seem to really skew those data. So the proposal is to use only student growth percentiles, and that we would use the most recent consecutive years, so that includes 2020 and 2021, using skip year growth to calculate growth in 21. And skip year growth, I can't go into in a very technical way. I'm sure your assessment directors or other folks could help out, and I'll offer another contact here in a minute. We'll use skip year growth to calculate growth in 21 by using 1819 to 2021 growth. I think it's worth noting that at these meetings, in addition to local influence and voice in this decision, was a nonprofit called the Center for Assessment. And they work with lots of different states across the US. And so these calculations are also vetted by outside entities. So the schools identified for TSI in the fall of 22, we are asking, like I already said, we are asking to keep the 5% cut static due to the variance we might see from pre-pandemic time. There's a link to the public comment Qualtrics survey In that, there's a copy of the whole addendum for your reading pleasure. And I do believe that this addendum summary that I've linked here is a more reader-friendly version of that addendum. So I encourage you, if you have comments you'd like to make about the addendum or to learn more, those links should be useful. Oh, and the contact person I wanted to mention, I'll put in the chat. Anne Michelle Neal is our accountability specialist at the state. And she's happy to explain any more technical questions or calculation questions that you might have. And she is the main author of the addendum that we're sending to the Department of Ed. That's my contact information, as well as my supervisor's information, Tracy Van Deventer. She's traveling to a conference now, so she couldn't be here with us. But as always, we hope to provide clarity and any assistance that we possibly can for this new and now more complex student school improvement designation. That's really all I have. This is Anne Michelle Neal's email that may be of use to you, and I will share my slides and resources with Marie. Feel free to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, we'll find it, or we may have to wait for Department of Ed to answer it for us. So.
Do we have any questions at this time? I don't see any in chat, but if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question or put one in chat, we're happy to give a few minutes for questions.
It's a riveting topic, I know. So I think questions
You
will come
dazzled
up.
us with your knowledge, Leslie.
Well, let me know if you have questions. Happy to support. And I'll send you those slides. I'll put them right in the chat before I go.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. All right, well, we are now running a little ahead of schedule, and we've already had our campaign procedure and process gone over for us. So I'm going to see, is Spreety on our call? We can ask her to move forward. Yep, Spreety, hi.
Sure. Hi,
Can we
Marie.
turn the time over to you right now?
Sure, sounds good.
Perfect.
All right, thank you. Can I share my screen real quick?
Yes, you should have that capability.
Okay, awesome. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
There we go. Now we can.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. You can still see it, right?
We can see the presenter with the notes. Yes.
Presenter with the notes. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll just leave it this way. Otherwise, it's going to my next screen. Sorry.
Make it too small. Yeah. Perfect.
Awesome.
This looks great.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Spreety Takal, Financial Compliance Auditor with the State Charter School Board, here to present you and update you guys a little bit on the LEA Financial Information Systems. So moving on to the first slide. So HB 67 LEA Financial Information System was signed by the governor last year. And based on the bill, it requires the USBE to make certain rules related to the requirements of LEA to comply their financial systems with the USB's information system. So in the process, the bill requires certain amendments to the LEA's data system, and it allows USBE to assist an LEA in meeting requirements for a financial management system by providing funding to the LEAs or even procuring a financial management system on behalf of the LEAs. And lastly, beginning July 1st, 2023, it allowed USBE to take action against any LEA that does not comply with the requirements related to these information system compliance. However, there have been some updates since then, just this session, SB 79 School Information Management System Amendment was reviewed. And this was basically done to extend the deadline for the implementation of the USIM system from July 1st, 2023 to July 1st, 2024. So basically just adding 1 year in between. And due to this, the deadline is being pushed because there was shortages of software programmers and just, related to COVID. So, as such, it is expected that the rule R277-427, which is the current rules based on the law that was passed, the bill that was passed last year, it is expected that this rule will be updated as well. And so, yeah, so as of now, it is my understanding that USB has just completed an RFP process, and they are in the process of identifying the systems that will meet the requirements. And once they come up with a list of, systems that the LEAs, are okay to move forward with, they will update us with more information on that. So yeah, so we'll just wait to hear back from USB, what is included in their list of approved systems, and if there are any systems that they exclude at this time. So yeah, we'll just wait to hear back from them. And that is all I have for now. Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Smriti. I don't see any questions coming in chat. If anyone does have a question, again, feel free to unmute and you can ask your question or put it in chat, and we're happy to get that answered for you.
Right. And one more thing, this information has also been shared with your business managers. These slides were sent out sometime last week, so they all are aware and in the loop. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It does look like we had one question come through.
Okay.
They said, I think the big one will be if any version of QuickBooks will be allowed.
Yeah, probably, yeah. So at this time, unfortunately, I cannot give you any further guidance, but, hopefully we should be, a bigger form of QuickBooks might be allowed. So yeah, we will pass on that information as soon as we know about it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, our next presenter is about a half hour out. So we had on the end of our agenda to do some networking and collaborating. That has been some feedback that we have received that has been very much appreciated by our school leaders. So I'm thinking maybe we can move that up now. And then at 2 o'clock, we will have Kimberly Ernie, and she is here to talk, going to be talking about school libraries, and she's actually on a school library board and wants to make sure that she has the charter perspective that she can share with her board. And then our training topic today will be immediately following her in case you have anyone that's joining you for that. And we'll be talking about compassionate school discipline for our leadership training. So at this point, let's open up for networking and collaborating. If there are questions or things you want to pick the brains of your colleagues here, we're all on the call. We'll open up for questions or things you want to discuss. I know it looked like one email had come through from Wade Glather at Ascent Academies. He was asking if some people had experience using, I believe it was a certain kind of program. So hopefully he was able to get some answers for that. If not, we can start there, or any other questions or things you want to bring up and network together on.
Marie, this is Renee from Itinerants. I have a question.
Hi, Renee. Yeah, go ahead. Post it in your group.
It seems like enrollment seems to be down, at least recruiting for us and enrollment. And I think COVID, we took a big hit. I don't know if others are feeling the same way. Our recruiting efforts, we've had to double them up and they just don't seem to be bringing in the students. I'm trying to figure out ways to, my frustration is we get funded in part by tax dollars, yet we don't have access to the database of student addresses that are available to even do some targeted marketing for schools that, students that live in our neighborhood. And we've been trying to work with districts, and sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. Has anyone had any luck, or is there anything at the state level that might be able to help us get access? I mean, we get funding, but we aren't allowed to have lists of students who potentially can come to your school. So it seems a little frustrating.
Renee, I think that's a great question to start out with. So maybe sharing some things that are working or not working enrollment wise, or ways that you have found to work around some of those challenges in locating students. Any thoughts from the group?
There's one thing, Renee, to be aware of. I asked Senator Pulsifer to run a bill of reverse articulation. So if you've got an articulation agreement with another school where your kids move up to, and there hasn't been any thing against it, you could then do it the other way too, so that the school below you could build theirs, and you could build more from their population. So it's going both ways. I'm hopeful that that might be helpful. We've also seen a decrease. The physical district whose boundaries we reside in was very smart. They've watched how charters advertise, how we call our schools, and they did the very same thing with their online schools. I've had many parents contact me and say, but that's a charter school with this district. And I've said, no, it's not. So they were smart in noticing how charters have done it. So I think it's just a matter of getting it out there. We're working with the same kinds of challenges you are. The one thing we found is we're trying to identify the grades that we've lost the most kids in, and doing more to make multiple contacts with them as they come in.
That sounds like some really good ideas. And I think that, like you mentioned, the reverse articulation, I think that's a really interesting idea to explore. So thank you for the work you've done with that. I guess also we can pat ourselves a little bit on the back that as charters, you're making those districts innovate, right? And now it's our turn to innovate again and figure out how to get those kids back. Other ideas that we can share with Renee or with others that are struggling with enrollment, or just, I guess, commiserating if you're feeling the same things.
Hanifi speaking, Mary.
Hi, yes, go ahead.
Hi. I mean, I agree with Renee. I mean, it has been slower for us as well. Over the years, we typically finish like towards like middle of the February our enrollment process, but it's kind of taking longer. It's not that we probably won't get the numbers. It's just, I don't know, people are taking time to make decisions. So that slowness and kind of like spreading is somehow what I have seen this year more. So I somehow like agree that that's the trend. But also, the addresses, I use a data company that I purchase addresses that I want, like, they target zip codes and the age groups that have the kids in their homes. So that could be a good idea if she wants to do some targeted kind of like, marketing. That's the way it's working. I mean, I purchase it. I know that, some agencies could share, but they usually don't. So let's find our own way of like purchasing, paying some money for it, but we still get it.
That's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts on enrollment. I know last time that we talked, we also discussed like substitutes and the struggles with that. I don't know if anyone has found creative ways to help with that challenge. Also, as we're coming up on hiring season, if anyone has any great ideas or questions that they want to get some opinions from the group on that. That might be two different topics, and we certainly can continue talking about enrollment. Just throwing a few topics out there for our group here.
Marie, I have one just that
Yeah, go ahead.
I heard this weekend as I was talking with some other educators that we're seeing one of the like this year in particular, we're seeing the largest mid-year position openings. I don't know a better way to phrase that, but I'm wondering, charter schools, are you kind of experiencing that same thing, that you've had more positions open, more teachers leave middle of the year this year than in the past?
Yeah, I can chime in there if that's okay.
Yeah.
Please, we'd love to hear from you.
You know, we haven't had a lot of staff members leave mid-year, but certainly in the 7 years I've been at Endeavor Hall, we've had more people not make it to December than ever before. And that's not just teachers, that's support staff as well. And the majority of them have left teaching completely. I mean, when I say the majority, it's like 3 or 4, but we're a small charter school. And when 3 or 4 people leave between October 1st and December 31st, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Citing the stress of the last 2 years, a lot of the younger grades, first, second, and third grade teachers that have left and or are still here are citing fatigue from having to over assess, things like that. So maybe it's just you and I, William.
I think it's kind of I mean, the pandemic was certainly a shake up, and, you know, we're 2 years into that of having kind of unique teaching schedules. And I'm kind of curious how everybody seems to be holding up. There's a couple that say, you know, no, we haven't. Yes, we have.
Yeah, somebody mentioned in the chat room asking for more time, and absolutely, we have found that our teachers would what I call April tired in December, and it's not always easy to find that. I see Tyler Bastion just popped up. You're going to have something good, I'm sure, coming from Tyler in a minute. Ignore everything I said, Tyler.
I was just going to say, don't ignore everything you said. I've seen way more burnout this year, and we did have a teacher leave like mid first quarter. And so I think it's definitely, and like you said, Simon, most of our teachers that are either leaving next year or left have left education.
Yeah. So
it is a lot of burnout. Way more sick days, not even COVID related, more sick days and burning up all your PTO quickly this year than we've ever had. So
I see that as a recurring theme in our chat too, just teachers who are stressed and maxed out. Thoughts on that, like supporting our teachers or other things? Also, I noticed somebody had said also staffing their kitchens have been a significant challenge. Not so much with the teachers, but oh yes, and Brett, so our admin, we're all tapped out, absolutely. Thoughts on how to get that passion back? I think Robin said that really well. Losing their sense of purpose, which leads to a loss of passion. So thoughts on any of that? Katina, I see you're on screen. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to eat lunch, so I got off screen, so, you know, nobody would watch me chew. But we started, for most of you don't know our history, but when I stepped into this role, 66% of the staff left, right? Because they're like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, I'm leaving. And it's now been 7 years, 6 years. And this is my third year with 100% retention. So we're happy with that. And the reason I share that is because one of the things that we've started doing, when I say we, I'm talking about the team, right? Not me by myself, is that we started last year with a digital suggestion box, and you probably all have something like this, but just because people weren't really filling in the suggestion box we had. So we started the digital one so that they could just fill in a Google Docs kind of thing. And we started noticing very tiny, small things that we were actually, things that we could actually do something about. I can't do anything about what happens on the Hill. Well, I try, it doesn't really go anywhere. But do you know what I'm saying? Or big issues. We were trying to do, what can we do today for you? What can I do today, now? And there were silly things, but there were these tiny little things that people started feeling heard. And that made such a big difference. In fact, it was things such as, could we have this instead of that? Could you do this instead of this? Sure. Some of these things we could handle right away, and we were doing right away. In fact, I had someone say, we do a check-in meeting. I used to call it a powwow, but somebody got offended, so I stopped calling it a powwow. We now call it a check-in. Every Monday morning at 7:45, 15 minutes before the bell rings, everybody comes in the teacher's lounge, and I basically give them an update. Here's what the week looks like. Here's what may be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Don't forget this. Da, 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 da. They appreciate it because it helps them be in the know without being too much in the know. So they don't feel like I'm overwhelming them with information, but I'm keeping them current. So that's been an advantage. But that digital suggestion box, which was a suggestion from one of the teachers, has really been awesome, because regardless of how silly some of those things are, I don't care. We talk about it, and I write an email every Wednesday to say, hey, here's what our leadership meeting discussed. Here are the items in the suggestion box, and here what we are able to do. But just being heard has made a huge difference. Just like you, everybody in the school is burnt out. We're tired of the complaining of the parents. We're tired of students not showing up and our attendance being terrible. We're tired of having our teachers and students working on a goal that just seems to go up in smoke, because guess what? We had to go remote for 2 weeks because most of our staff were sick or students were sick. So all of these things just compound. They just add and add and add and add weight. I am an eternal optimist, and I have got a lot of energy. But to be honest with you, I actually took a day off, which, was crazy. Nobody believed me, but I did, because I was drained emotionally, mentally, physically drained. So I absolutely get it. But we've been doing some of these small things to really try to take care of those annoyances that you wish were different, in an effort to recognize we can't change some of the big things. I can't change the pandemic, but I can change the fact that you don't like that, whatever. And that's made a lot of difference for us. Requirements are still there. Observations are still in play. We still need to meet all the goals we've set. But I think the other piece of it is trying to focus on, well, what can we do? I can't do that, but what can I do? And so far, so good. So far, everybody's returning next year. But that's been a big piece for us, is to try to do that, for what it's worth.
I think those are some really great thoughts. Thank you, Katina, for sharing that.
Awesome.
I think an interesting point too that you brought up there is just finding out, like, what is it they want, or, making people feel heard. And, sometimes it really can be those simple things. So that's really great. I see also in chat that Tyler mentioned that at his school, they read The Happiness Advantage as a staff, and that gave them a really good foundation for discussion and common language, and to talk about what we're all feeling. And I think that highlights what Brett said, like, even us, administrators, we're feeling it too. And it's helped a little bit with purpose and finding purpose gaps as well. So thanks, Tyler, for a book recommendation. That's great. Other thoughts or things we want to discuss about any of this? This is all important, and so great to hear your ideas and things that are working at your schools.
Hi, Marie.
Hi, Brendan. Do you have some ideas to share with us?
Actually, I was hoping that maybe I could take just a minute to introduce myself to.
Oh, we had talked about that and I forgot that. I'm so sorry. Yes,
That's
please
okay.
introduce yourself and share any great bits of wisdom that you have on leading schools and helping communities. So we'd love to hear from you.
That's a pretty bold request. But I did want to just introduce myself as a portfolio manager for the State Charter School Board. I know that I've emailed all the directors and board chairs, and I just wanted you to, put a face behind those emails. I did want to share, since we have just a little bit of time, that in my 16 years of being a teacher and administrator in Utah, this is my first desk job. And this is the first time in my life I've ever had a cubicle. And I'm grateful for the cubicle, but I would take any advantage to visit your school as your portfolio manager. I love visiting. I love being a part of school. So if I happen to be your portfolio manager and your school support person at the State Charter School Board, please send out an email anytime. I'd love to set up a time to visit. Sometimes it's just good to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, or to vent, or maybe just to show off all the good things that your school is doing, and have a state representative see that is a really good thing for your school. So I don't want to be a burden in any way. Of course, don't want to take up more time, but I just wanted to extend the offer that I would love to come visit anytime. So anyways, thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. And I apologize for that oversight at the beginning of our meeting.
No, this was the perfect time.
This is great. All right, well, we'll give just another few seconds and see if anyone has anything they want to share. Otherwise, I do see that Kimberly's joined us, so we can keep moving on our agenda. I don't want to cut this short. I know that you guys like this time to collaborate and network. So if there are questions or things you want to discuss, we'll give like 30 more seconds. Wait time is hard on Zoom, so 30 more seconds or so. All right. Well, thank you for those who engaged in our discussion today. Hopefully you got some ideas and things that you can take away, things to try, or at least felt heard and felt, like you're not the only one facing the challenges that you are, because we are all in this together. So we will now kind of shift. We've got Kimberly Ernie here. And as I mentioned, she's going to be sharing some school library information. And so we will turn the time over to her.
Thank you. Like she said, I'm Kimberly. I'm the charter representative on the UELMA board and the Utah Library Media Supervisors. I'm going to keep this short and to the point so you can collaborate afterwards. I'm here today because we have a historically high number of book challenges across the US, and I want to help you become better prepared. Equal access to libraries and literature provides equal opportunities. Books help our students with social and emotional learning, and a good librarian in a well-stocked library can help a student find the just right book for them. Books can validate a person, but only if diverse texts are available. This includes windows and mirror books, or books where the reader's experience is either different from their own, a window, or they experience characters and situations similar to their own, a mirror. Let me drop a link in the chat. The first link on the document is for a new rule being developed in Utah. It has three main components, and stop me if you already went over this. It has a required selection policy, so you have to develop a selection policy. You have to develop a reconsideration policy, and then there's a requirement to follow these policies. As noted in the Utah Library Advocates Guide, the last link on the link I shared, A failure to follow your procedures may result in a costly litigation with little chance of prevailing and a high likelihood that you will be held responsible for the plaintiff's legal fees as well as your own. If you already have a selection policy, as well as a reconsideration policy, it may be time to review or at least become familiar with them. If you don't have these policies, ALA has guidelines to help your school library develop policies appropriate for your school. UALMA also has examples from local schools. UALMA is our Utah's School Librarian Association. These two resources can be found in the link I shared. Because I don't want to say when, if you experience a request for reconsideration, Granite has created and shared this easy to read infographic. And please share this with your office. We know they're the first contacts. And please share it with your library staff members. If a patron does come in upset about the book, the first step is to listen. Don't apologize for the book. Don't promise any action. Don't say that you agree with their opinion, because every kid needs a book. Every kid needs to be heard, but not every book is for every kid. That book they don't like may be exactly what another student needs. Your professional library staff can be called in to also listen and then take it from there. Sometimes families are content with that second step on the infographic, an opportunity to exchange the book for one more suitable for their family. Your teacher librarian will explain the purpose of the library, and all library users have the right to read what has been professionally curated for your library collection. Your teacher librarian may thank them for being an involved parent, for looking out for their child's interest, but the library needs to provide that opportunity for all parents. After being thoroughly heard, respected, and politely informed, hopefully the challenge has subsided. If the experience continues to this last step, a parent requests an item to be reconsidered. ALA has a toolkit you may use, as well as contacts to help you through the process. And remember, your local associations are also here to help, UALMA and ULMS. If you need a way to explain it, I tell the students that families don't tell the neighbors what they can and cannot watch on TV, YouTube, or TikTok, just like they can't tell them what they can or cannot read. I encourage you to inform your librarians of the upcoming UALMA conference for continued learning experiences, and the registration is still open. What questions do you have? I need 10 minutes worth of questions.
I don't see any questions coming in chat. We can wait a few more seconds or so and see if any questions come up. Well, I think that was clear and precise. No questions remain. So thank you, Kimberly.
Yeah, if anything comes up, you are welcome to reach out to me, UALMA or ULMS.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll transition into our leadership training. As I mentioned, our topic today is compassionate school discipline. So let me get that pulled up. Let's see. There we go. Compassionate school discipline. All right. This training today is taken from the website positivesschooldiscipline.com, as well as the Positive School Discipline course for school leaders. And that is located on that same website. If you are interested in learning more, that is a free course. It is a 6-part course that you can go through and do some deeper diving into compassionate school discipline. So we wanted to begin with, do you agree or disagree with the following statements? And this isn't something that you necessarily need to share with us, but just kind of thinking through as our framework to begin thinking about compassionate school discipline. So one of the questions or thoughts, statements is removing disruptive students is necessary to make sure well-behaved students can learn. So thinking, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Another one, teachers and school leaders need to punish students to maintain safety and order. So again, thoughts on that, just, you know, as you're thinking through here. Rising rates in the US are due to increasing school violence. Rising rates of violence, I think I missed a word there, are due to increasing school violence. So again, thinking if that's something you agree or disagree with. I do see a question that came through. We will be sending our training out, yes. And thank you if you do have to hop off. We'll be recording and sending out. The next one, students of color are disciplined at higher rates because they misbehave more often. So again, thinking, is that something you agree with or disagree with that statement? The last two, suspensions are necessary to deter future infractions. And the last one, suspensions will help get a parent's attention and help curb misbehavior. All right, so thinking through if you agree or disagree with those items there. If you end up, you know, kind of on the fence, then, you know, that might be a place where you've maybe used some punitive discipline approaches, you've used some more positive approaches. And so the information that we go over can hopefully encourage you to use more positive discipline approaches. If you feel like you disagree with a lot of these statements, you're probably already supportive of a lot of positive school discipline approaches. And hopefully then we'll go over some strategies today to further help the work that you're doing. If you ended up agreeing with a lot of these, you might be more supportive of punitive discipline than positive discipline. And so maybe just some of the information today will give you a few things to think about and perhaps a new way of looking at things that you might not have considered before. And so to start with, we wanted to really talk about what does it look like to have successful, thriving children and youth in our schools. And really what leads to those successful and thriving children and youth is this linear path of partnerships, plans, and then actions. And you'll see from that arrow at the bottom that everything we're doing should really be driven by data-informed decision-making. As I was diving into this course and trying to figure out what pieces were most important to share with you today, I really wanted to focus on the planning and the acting stages. I think as far as school leaders, you probably know who you are partnering with, who you can partner with. You have a pretty good idea of your stakeholders. Also, I want to talk a little bit about that data-informed decision-making and how we can use that to really plan and act and hopefully come away with some actionable ideas to bring passionate discipline and supportive discipline to our schools. So in thinking about data, I really loved this quote. It said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And without improvement, you're just a person playing with numbers. I hear someone unmuted. Is there a question that where someone wants to ask? Okay, if there is, please stop me. I'm always happy to stop and chat along the way. So I loved this quote because as it points out, you know, if you're not using data, then you're just kind of sharing opinions and what you think might work. And if you do have that data, but there's not improvement that's happening, then we're kind of just playing with numbers. And so how do we really make the data speak to us and drive what we're doing at our schools? And so with that, we're going to talk about what kinds of data should we collect and what should we look for in that data. So some things that we should look for as we are starting to collect data would be, the first one is patterns. So if we're looking for patterns, we might be asking what kinds of patterns are we seeing in referral rates, in gaps in achievement, in suspensions? What can that pattern tell us? And maybe we don't know yet what it tells us, but what patterns are we seeing? Another one pattern you could look for would be, are there days, times, certain locations that might be able to benefit from some preventative measures? Also, as you're looking for patterns, you might be looking at what are the trends by grade level or by class. And so just as you begin to collect data, that's one thing to keep in mind of what kinds of patterns are you seeing in your data here. If you are already collecting data, then really what we want to start looking at is consistency. So some questions you'll want to ask there are your staff and your teachers, are they following the processes that you currently have in place for school discipline? Another consistency piece would be, are students receiving suspensions or consequences for non-mandatory offenses? And kind of that last one, are the staff throughout the building using data and implementing the interventions consistently? If consistency is a problem, that would be a different piece that we would want to look at and create our plan moving forward in that regard. We also want to look at the direction that we're moving. And so some questions that we'll want to look at there are, which teams, grade levels, or individual teachers could benefit from some additional development, some mentoring, or some interventions and help. We might also look at if our students that are receiving high referral rates are new to the school. Other new students, are they receiving extra support? Is there evidence that extra support is changing behavior? If we're spending that time providing that extra support and we're not seeing the changes, we know that something else needs to occur or that some other piece is missing from our equation. Also with that, looking for direction, what can we see in the data that helps us pinpoint specific strategies for interventions and or support? And so as we look through our data, as I mentioned, we're really going to be looking for consistency, for direction, and for patterns. And so since we're looking for consistency, direction, and patterns, the next slide is going to talk about what kinds of data can we or should we collect. And I know when I was a school leader, I collected some of this, but I was really impressed with the list that they had on that website that went over a lot more different types of data that I hadn't necessarily thought about collecting. And so I think this data would really help us in our decision making as we're looking for those patterns, that consistency in that direction. So looking to what data should we collect? The first one that it recommended was office referrals. Now, I'm sure you're already collecting that. If a student gets sent to the office, you know who it is, you know who your frequent flyers are or your frequent offenders. But some different things that it brought up as far as our office referrals are the student name, age, and gender, their race, if they have any at-risk identifiers, their grade level, their referring person, what was their violation or offense, any previous interventions that were attempted, the location that it happened, as well as the date and the time of day. And as I mentioned, we collected who it was and, what had happened. But I think collecting some of this additional information will really help inform your school if there's a pattern that's occurring here, if, consistency, if the referring person is always the same person, maybe that's someone who needs some additional training or support, and really helps them provide that direction of what we need to do next as a school. Another piece of data that they suggested was collecting the actual consequence data. So looking at, what consequences are you giving out? And they recommended, placing those into 4 different categories. What types of non-suspensions are you giving out? So that would be, a warning, an after school or a lunch detention, if they're having mediation, mental health referrals, parent conferences. The next one would be if you're giving a suspension or an expulsion or an alternative placement, that you're really just collecting this data so that you can again look for those patterns, that consistency, and look for direction as to what your data is telling you. Another piece that they recommended collecting would be student data. And so besides just noting, who it was and who was involved, I think a lot of us, jot that down. We might also look a little deeper at that data. What is that student's academic record? What is their attendance like? What is their discipline history? Have they had infractions before? Are they receiving interventions for behavior or otherwise? What does parental contact look like? Are the parents involved with helping you troubleshoot some of these behaviors? And what sort of consequences have the students received? And again, that will help us as we're looking for those patterns, that consistency, and that direction that we should move next. The final data point that was recommended on that website was some school climate data. And I think often we survey our parents or our stakeholders and, ask them, how are things going at school? And that's certainly a great piece to get some beginning data about our school climate. But we might also want to think about asking our students and, asking them some more specific questions than, just, do you like going to school here? Or, is your teacher nice to you? Some pieces that were brought up on that website were how students and families feel the care for students is. And you'll notice that each of these begin with the word perceived. And I think that's a really important piece to remember if you are doing a climate survey, that whether you agree or not, if these things are happening at your school, really it's the perception that your community and that your students are having, and that perception is going to be what drives those attitudes at school. And that from that perception, we can use that to develop a plan to help us move forward and create a more positive learning environment with supportive discipline. And so there's that first one, as I mentioned, the perceived care for the students. Another one is the perceived fairness of the rules. Do students feel like the rules are fair and that they are being applied equally across the board? Do parents feel that way? Maybe even asking your staff, do they feel like it's being applied equally across the board? The next one was the perceived use of positive discipline techniques. So again, whether you're already doing them or you're not, just what is the perceived use? Do they feel like that's happening? Do they feel like it's going well at school? And then that last one was the perceived safety of your school. And so again, getting the climate survey results can really help move you forward in creating a more positive, safe space for your students. So all of that really spoke to that data-driven decision-making, which was that bottom arrow. And so we want to talk next about creating a plan. So once we have all of these data pieces, how do we use it? What do we do? What comes next? And so the recommendation was that with all of these pieces, we take a multi-pronged approach to having compassionate and positive discipline at our school. And a multi-pronged approach was seen as bringing together these 5 different elements. And you'll see those listed there in the orange. There's policies, there's classroom management and engagement, there's evidence-based programs and practices, there's school and community support services, and family engagement. And the quote here, it says, positive school discipline is a constellation of policies, programs, and practices that promote positive behaviors while preventing negative and risky behaviors. And I loved this next, excuse me, my finger slid ahead there. I love the next part. It says, it aims to create a safe, supportive learning environment that enhances all students' outcomes. And that to really shift the paradigm from punitive to positive school discipline, we need to employ a comprehensive approach that includes all 5 prongs. And that part there that I loved about creating that safe, supportive learning environment is that it really will help all of our students. We've heard from Leslie today, who talked about TSI. We've talked about, when students are not getting what they need at school, and that so often these are our students that end up having these discipline and behavior problems. And so if we could really get to the heart of it and adjust these 5 prongs here: adjusting our policies, our classroom management, our engagement, our evidence-based programs and practices, our school and community support services, and our family engagement. If we can adjust those things, that we can really help all of our students, and not just our high performers or those who fit the norm at our school. So next, we're going to dig a little deeper into each of those different prongs. And we want to talk about why it matters. Why do your policies matter if you're talking about school discipline? Why does family engagement matter? Why does evidence-based programs, why do these things matter if we're talking about how our students are behaving at school? So the first one was policies. And so why does it matter? And so the reason that it matters is that if we leave our policies out of our multi-pronged approach, then those teachers and staff members that want to implement positive discipline practices, and even our administration, they might be unsure if their actions will be approved or are contrary to school directives. There will be no consistency and no framework for them to work within. And also another reason that it matters is that teacher behavior is unlikely to change if policy stays the same. Students also won't have a clear understanding of expectations or consequences for behaviors. So really our policies matter. Our policies are at the heart of what we do. Moving next to our classroom management and engagement. Why does it matter? And so it says here, if classroom management and engagement are left out of our multi-pronged approach, teachers will often continue to view punitive discipline as a quick and effective fix to dealing with all forms of student behavior. Your staff need professional development, training, and coaching in order to become skillful at classroom management and instructional engagement. I know from firsthand experience, this is so important, and that, as it says, that if we leave that out, our teachers will often continue to use punitive discipline as that quick and effective measure. It is easy for our teachers to say, go to the principal's office, or, after recess, you've got the group in the office that you need to talk to. And so what kinds of things can we put in place to help make sure that our students and our staff have what they need to be successful, and that they know how to better address the needs of our students? So then we want to talk about evidence-based programs and practices. So again, why does it matter? And so it says here, if we leave our evidence-based programs and practices out of our multi-pronged approach, then we are essentially flying blind, And with that, we're just hoping that what we're doing will work. And the evidence-based programs are based on research and results and are validated by data. And so using evidence-based programs and practices to improve the climate and the culture of our school can be the difference between working hard and just hoping for a positive outcome, and the difference between that and working smart, which is then working with a high probability of a positive outcome. Next, we want to talk about school and community support services. So again, we're asking, why does it matter? If we leave this out of our multi-pronged approach, the school will be unable to address underlying issues such as academic, behavioral, and mental health problems that contribute to discipline challenges. Community investment in schools builds stronger schools as well as stronger communities. People are invested in those things that they help to create. And so by bringing together our school and our community support services, we can help to address the underlying issues that may be factoring in to those problems that our students are experiencing. I know, you're probably well versed in this. Sometimes our students come to school and they don't have, their basic hierarchy of needs met. Maybe they didn't have breakfast. Maybe they didn't get a good night's sleep. Maybe their parents were up fighting. There can be a lot of different things there. Maybe they're bringing a mental health challenge with them. And so having those people within our community that we know we can turn to can really help us to be able to provide those services. And finally, we want to talk about family engagement. So again, why does it matter? It matters because our families are critical partners in finding solutions to student issues. And without their voice, that critical partner is missing. Family involvement has been shown time after time to be a key to student success. And when families believe in and trust the school staff and the administration, they view them as partners who will genuinely value their student and support the important work of families. And so we want to talk about, we've gone over some of these practices, some data to collect, some things to think about as you're moving forward, but to recognize that change is hard and that those punitive measures they're fast, they're easy. And so if we are moving towards more positive student discipline, how do we create that buy-in with our staff? If we're using those evidence-based practices, how do we share that? How do we make sure that this is successful at our school? And so our last little bit today, we want to go over some different feedback that you might hear from staff members or community members and strategies that can help you as you're figuring out which evidence-based practices to use at your school and how to bring those positive behaviors with your students. And we recognize that everybody's school model is different, and what works at your school is going to be different than what works at someone else's school. But that often the challenges that arise will be similar. And so wanting to share some strategies to help you in overcoming the challenges of implementing this within your community, within your school. So the first one, the quote is on the side. This person says, "I'm not sure what everyone is so concerned about. I don't see any problems with discipline here at our school." And so the strategies here, if this is the feedback that you're getting, would be to present data and discuss those disproportionalities. And so that's where, from our very beginning, we're looking for those patterns. If we're finding that, fifth grade, they're getting sent to the office far more than everyone else, what's happening in fifth grade? Or if it's students of a certain race, or if it's our special education students, what's happening and where are we seeing that there is a concern within our data? Another strategy would be to compare your data to similar schools and to see, whether it's looking between different school models or similar models, looking between schools that serve similar sizes or similar grade levels, just really pulling some data to show what's happening with discipline at other schools and how your school compares to that. And another strategy here, when this person says, I don't see any problems with discipline here at our school, is to really invite them and invite all of your stakeholders into this discussion. If you are going to be making changes and bringing more compassionate discipline to your school, you'll want to make sure that overall, you have that teacher buy-in, your students are buying in, your families are buying in. And so making sure that they're involved in this discussion and that they agree that this is something that you want to do to better support students and, again, to lead to those better outcomes for all of your students at your school. So now we've shown the data, we've talked about it, and now their feedback is, well, I guess the data supports blank, right? It supports making this change. And they say, excuse me, but I think it's someone else's issue. I'm not convinced we need to change anything. And so if that's what you're hearing, and again, your data supports it, you feel like this is the direction you need to move, some strategies here are to demonstrate how positive school discipline has been used at other schools to support learning. You'll also want to hold some information sessions, and that would be different for each audience. Maybe it's an information session for students about what changes to expect. Maybe it's an information session for parents and guardians. Maybe it's an information session for your kitchen staff or those who are doing recess duty or your hall monitors. But really just making sure that everyone understands how this is going to impact them. Another strategy is to make sure that you're providing pre-implementation training for your staff. And so rather than, having one PD or two PDs and saying, okay, we're changing this, now let's go forward. We really want to make sure that we're doing pre-implementation training if we're making any behavior and, consequences type changes at our school. It is recommended that you follow these 4 steps as far as pre-implementation training. The first one being an introduction to the program or to the practices that you're going to begin using. Then you want to build in-depth knowledge of that program or those practices. And this, going along with the earlier strategies here of, talking about what it does at other schools, looking at that data together, really building that knowledge base for your staff is going to give them that confidence to move forward with it. The third piece was to give them an opportunity to practice and to receive feedback. And doing this outside of, now it's go time, now it counts, but giving them really that opportunity to practice and receive feedback from others within the school and to try and figure out what questions do they have, what additional training or support do they need. And then that fourth piece, as you are giving those opportunities to practice and to receive feedback, it's suggested that during this time you identify those potential challenges and solutions. And of course, other challenges and solutions might come up once you have a full rollout of your policy or your program or your practice. But that during this pre-implementation time, you can hopefully identify most challenges and solutions and feel really well prepared to face that rollout and to do so successfully. So here's another concern, and I think especially now with all the things that are going on in schools, this might just feel like this one. We get those staff members or those parents that say, oh, this is just one more thing we have to do. So again, use your climate results. Make sure, if this is the right time to make a change, this can be a really positive thing for your school. But if it's not the right time, it's not the right time, and it's something you can revisit a little bit later. As you are approaching this, maybe look at having some one-on-one conversations or small group conversations with your staff, with your parents, with your stakeholders, to really talk about their concerns and to make sure that you are hearing them. I loved that Katina brought that up when we were talking about our problems of practice, of so much just really people want to be heard. And so how do we help them feel like they're heard and that we're moving forward with all the data that gives us what we need if this is the right time for our school? If you do decide this is the right time and it's something you're wanting to move forward with and you've had those one-on-one conversations and they're still just not quite on board, you might consider that second strategy, which is to assign some resistant individuals to work in groups that include individuals who are influential and supportive of the new program and practices. And so hopefully, learning by osmosis, right? They're around people who are sharing those ideas and sharing that excitement, and that hopefully that buy-in can be created at that point. Another concern that might come up is that, if you get moving along, you've shared the background, you think you've, explained it really well, and then here comes this person. They say, okay, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. And so if that happens, they recommend bringing some implementers or giving your implementers, your teachers, your staff, ongoing professional development and support. So as I mentioned, just, one time, hey, we're going to make some changes. Here's what we want to do. We want to bring this positive intervention to our school. But really, getting to the heart of how do we help our teachers continue to roll it out and to implement it correctly. And so that might look like coaching and mentoring. It might look like evidence-based practice booster sessions. So again, you're bringing in some learning and giving them another boost of, here's some more things to think about and to consider as you're working through this model. You might do some demonstration lessons by skilled implementers. And you might also want to look at scheduling some regular opportunities to share challenges and successes. That could be in the format of a PLC or maybe different groupings that you have, but really giving your teachers that time to share what are their challenges, what are their successes. Next, here's this person. They say, okay, we've been doing blah, blah, blah. We've made these changes. We're doing all these positive things that you wanted us to do. And then they ask, are things really that different, right? And so the strategies there are to collect and process your data and to then assess if you're meeting your goals. So you've made some changes, make sure you go back to that beginning step, gather that data, look again for those patterns, that consistency, and that direction that you need to move, and assess if you're moving in that direction and if your patterns are changing, are things moving the way that you would like them to. And if they are not, which might be the case, that might happen, there are two things to note. If they are not moving in the right direction, then you'll want to check and see if your evidence-based practices and policies are being implemented with fidelity. That can often be the first problem that, we've learned these things, we've taught these things, we've, provided some coaching, but maybe there are still some fidelity issues that need to be dealt with. And that will help you know how to better support those individuals. Also, if you find that things are being implemented with fidelity and you're still not seeing the outcomes, then you'll want to notice the challenges and the needs identified by your implementers and provide ongoing professional development and support. So again, continuing to support them and hold their hand as they're working through this new process that you have. The next one, this comment was our department or our grade level, would like to implement some additional strategies that we think might allow us to get even better results. And so you might have those implementers who are doing really, really well. And so what do you do when this happens? The strategies are to train your people to experiment and collect data on their results. And so if they think, hey, I've learned this, I'm doing these things, I'm following it with fidelity, but I have some ideas that would allow us to get even better or continue to grow, train them that they can collect that data and they can, try and experiment those things themselves. Also, make sure that you're documenting any changes that are being made and continuing to monitor the impact. Again, looking for those patterns, that consistency, and that direction. And the final one, as far as feedback you might hear, it might be a staff member or a community member that says it'd be great to hear what others are doing. And so when this happens, we want to make sure that we provide staff with coaches that can teach and facilitate effective collaboration practices, or we can arrange schedules so that staff have time to work together on the initiative. This could also be a great thing to bring up like at a director's meeting if you want to share and hear about things that are happening at other schools. And just really have that time to collaborate and discuss and continue to build on the best practices that everyone is doing. And so the final part here, we've got a little video that just again talks about positive behavior supports and gives a few ideas and talks about just kind of summarizing what we've gone over. And so I will share this and then we'll open up for any questions, thoughts, collaboration that you want to have on this topic as well. So we will now start the video.
My name is Bob Garrity. I work as a project leader for the Safe Schools Healthy Students Project. Love it. It's a great job. And what we've done is focused on school climate and trying to improve school climate. We have 10 evidence-based programs that we've introduced to the schools. We've worked with the principals, the teachers, the counselors, the students, the parents. And the idea is that if we work comprehensively in each of the schools and community-wide, then all of these different efforts will support each other in improving student behavior and student-teacher relationship.
Positive school discipline, it's all about relationships. Evidence-based programs are wonderful. We love using programs, especially that have shown that if we use fidelity measures, if we do that program as it's intended to be done, we're going to see positive results. But I'll tell you, if you don't have a dollar to your name, focusing on relationships is it. And I think that all of the things that we've tried to do, That's what it all rolls back into. Does it increase community, positive community within the school and in the classroom, and does it encourage positive relationships?
So the structure, the key structure for that is the morning circle, where, you know, every day, everybody, pretty much if you went to any classroom around the county, you would see pretty much the same thing happening.
So I'd like to do a sequence go around. This time start with Kelly and go that way.
The students would be in a circle, everybody's exchanging greetings, and then they begin to talk about behaving positively, but also if there are issues or concerns, then it can be addressed in a positive way rather than waiting to see who steps out of line coincidentally and then has to go to the principal's office.
When I arrived this morning, I felt nervous. Now I feel comfortable.
A lot of the teachers we worked with have done dialogue circles in their classrooms, and they find that conflict is reduced in their class, and getting along with the kids is a lot easier. Here in the circle, you get to talk about things that you think about. What was going well for you? What was not going well for you? What do you like? How do you feel? Those kinds of things. What are you interested in? So it helps create a relationship between and among all the people in the circle, so that when class is happening and a teacher needs a child to do something, they've got a relationship. It's not just a power struggle or a behavioral compliance relationship.
When I arrived this morning, I felt kind of calm and I'm hyped.
If you can address the students' need to be social and be socially connected to the teacher, they're going to learn better. And when you look at the data for, in particular, the Safe Schools Healthy Students Grant, there are many positive things that have happened in bringing down our overall discipline numbers, but the number I think it's impacted in the last 4 years is also our graduation rate. 4 years ago, we were at around 88%, and now we're above 91%, around 92%. So that means 20 to 30 more students are finishing now that weren't doing that before on time.
I expected exactly what I saw. Everybody came dressed and prepared and ready because we kind of talked with everybody ahead of time. And
One high school teacher we worked with, when she started, all she was thinking about was content and behavior, but when she started doing the circles, she started to know the children. And she said now, whenever she starts her school year, she spends a lot of time getting to know the kids, because if she doesn't, the content doesn't get to them. If we don't have that conduit of relationship, they don't get what I'm trying to give them. The question was, when you arrived today, what did you hope or what did you expect?
to have fun and work harder than I usually do.
All right, well, that is the end of our presentation. So we can open up now if anyone wants to talk more about positive school discipline or things that you found successful at your school, or questions about positive, compassionate, supportive discipline. It's called all those different things. So we can open that up. Otherwise, thank you for being here. And you know, we love having you here and hope it is a successful rest of the day. So comments, questions, idea sharing. All right, well, looks like we don't have any at this point. So hopefully that's given you some good things to think about. If a question or comment comes up, let us know. And we're always happy to help you out. I do see now one question came in chat. Hannah's wondering if anyone would be willing to contribute to a resource document of their school's positive behavior approaches and policies. Hannah, I think that's a great idea. If you'd like, I can create a Google Doc and I can send that out with our slides and our video. And so we'll get that going. again, we'd love to hear all those great things that are going on. If you're not sure where to start with that, you can also, request a training, or, we're always happy to provide a custom training for your school, more specific to your model, or ways that we can help you. And let's see, looks like she said Walden has a bit that we can share in this regard, and they do a lot of restorative justice. Awesome. That's such a great resource. All right, well, I will get that started and sent to you guys with all of these resources. Have a great afternoon. We're giving you back the gift of almost an hour. So happy Valentine's. That's your Valentine from us here at the state. So thank you so much for your time, and we will see you later.